Perfect. And I'm so sorry. I have a splitting headache tonight. But I welcome this break so very much. All right, tonight we are starting the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. This read was suggested by Mako, who loved it. So I picked it up, and after a certain point, I have not read this. So I apologize in advance for any laughter. Pieces I've come across in this book so far were fucking hilarious and took me by surprise. So I apologize in advance. Prologue. This story ends in blood. Every story begins in blood. A squalling baby yanked from the womb, bathed in mucus and half a quart of their mother's blood. But not many stories end in blood these days. Usually it's a return to the hospital and a dry, quiet death surrounded by machines after a heart attack in the driveway, a stroke on the back porch, or a slow fade from lung cancer. This story begins with 5 little girls, each born in a splash of her mother's blood, cleaned up, patted dry, then turned into proper young ladies, instructed in the wifely arts to become perfect partners and responsible parents, mothers who help with homework and do the laundry, who belong to church flower societies and bunco clubs, who send their children to cotillion and private schools. You've seen these women. They meet for lunch and laugh loudly enough for everyone in the restaurant to hear. They get silly after a single glass of wine. Their idea of living on the edge is to buy a pair of Christmas earrings that light up. They agonize far too long over whether or not to order dessert. As respectable individuals, their names will appear in the paper only 3 times: when they're born, when they get married, and when they die. They are gracious hostesses. They are generous to those less fortunate. They honor their husbands and nurture their children. They understand the importance of everyday china, the responsibility of inheriting great-grandmother's silver, the value of good linen. And by the time this story is over, they will be covered in blood. Some of it will be theirs. Some of it will belong to others. But they will drip with it. They will swim in it. They will drown in it. Housewife, noun, a light, worthless woman or girl. Oxford English Dictionary, Compact Edition, 1971. Cry, the Beloved Country, November, 1988. Chapter 1. In 1988, George H.W. Bush had just won the presidential election by inviting everyone to read his lips, while Michael Dukakis lost it by riding in a tank. Dr. Huxtable was America's dad. Kate and Allie were America's moms. The Golden Girls were America's grandmoms. McDonald's announced it was opening its first restaurant in the Soviet Union. Everyone bought Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time and didn't read it. Phantom of the Opera opened on Broadway, and Patricia Campbell got ready to die. She sprayed her hair, put on her earrings, and blotted her lipstick. But when she looked at herself in the mirror, she didn't see a housewife of 39 with 2 children and a bright future. She saw a dead person. Unless war broke out, the oceans rose, or the earth fell into the sun, tonight was the monthly meeting of the Literary Guild of Mount Pleasant, and she hadn't read this month's book. And she was the discussant. Which meant that in less than 90 minutes, she would stand up in front of a room full of women and lead them in a conversation about a book she hadn't read. She had meant to read Cry, the Beloved Country, honestly, but every time she picked up her copy and read, There is a lovely road that runs from Expo into the hills. Corey rode her bike off the end of the dock because she thought that if she pedaled fast enough, she could skim across the water, or she lit her brother's hair on fire, trying to see how close she could get a match before it caught, or she spent an entire weekend telling everyone who called her that her mother couldn't come to the phone because she was dead, which Patricia only learned about when people started showing up at the front door with condolence casseroles. Before Patricia could discover why the road that runs from Expo was so lovely, she'd see Blue run past the sun porch windows buck naked, or she'd realize the house was so quiet because she'd left him in the downtown library and had to jump in the Volvo and fly back over the bridge, praying he hadn't been kidnapped by Moonies, or because he decided to see how many raisins he could fit up his nose. 24. She never even learned where Expo was exactly because her mother-in-law, Miss Mary, moved in with them for a 6-week visit, and the garage room had to have clean towels, and the sheets on the guest bed had to be changed every day, and Miss Mary had trouble getting out of the tub, so they had one of those bars installed, and she had to find somebody to do that, and the children had laundry that needed to be done, and Carter had to have his shirts ironed, and Corey wanted new soccer cleats because everyone else had them, but she couldn't really afford them right now, and Blue was only eating white food, so she had to make rice every night for supper, and the road to Expo ran on to the hills without her. Joining the Literary Guild of Mount Pleasant had seemed like a good idea at the time. Patricia realized she needed to get out of the house and meet new people the moment she leaned over at supper with Carter's boss and tried to cut up his steak for him. A book club made sense because she liked reading, especially mysteries. Carter had suggested it because she went through life as if the entire world were a mystery to her, and she didn't disagree. Patricia Campbell and the secret of cooking 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, without losing your mind. Patricia Campbell in the case of the 5-year-old child who keeps biting other people. Patricia Campbell and the mystery of finding enough time to read the newspaper when you have 2 children and a mother-in-law living with you and everyone needs their clothes washed and to be fed and the house needs to be cleaned and someone has to give the dog his heartworm pills and you should probably wash your own hair every few days or your daughter is going to ask why you look like a street person. A few discreet inquiries, and she'd been invited to the inaugural meeting of the Literary Guild of Mount Pleasant at Marjorie Fretwell's house. The Literary Guild of Mount Pleasant picked their books for that year in a very democratic process. Marjorie Fretwell invited them to select 11 books from a list of 13 she found appropriate. She asked if there were other books anyone wanted to recommend, but everyone understood that that wasn't a real question, except for Slick Paley, who seemed chronically unable to read social cues. "I'd like to nominate Like Lambs to the Slaughter, Your Child and the Occult," Slick said. With that crystal store on Coleman's Boulevard and Shirley MacLaine on the cover of Time magazine talking about her past lives, we all need a wake-up call. "I've never heard of it," Marjorie Fretwell said, "so I imagine it falls outside our mandate of reading the great books of the Western world. Anyone else?" "But," Slick protested. "Anyone else?" Marjorie repeated. They selected the books Marjorie wrote down for them, assigned each book of the month Marjorie thought best, and picked the discussants Marjorie thought were most appropriate. The discussant would open the meeting by delivering a 20-minute presentation on the book, its background, and the life of its author, and then lead the group discussion. A discussant could not cancel or trade books with anyone else without paying a stiff fine because the Literary Guild of Mount Pleasant was not fooling around. When it became clear she wasn't going to be able to finish Cry the Beloved Country, Patricia called Marjorie. "Marjorie," she said over the phone, while putting a lid on the rice and turning it down from a boil, "it's Patricia Campbell. I need to talk to you about Cry the Beloved Country." "Such a powerful work," Marjorie said. "Of course," said Patricia. "I know you'll do it justice," Marjorie said. "I'll do my best," Patricia said, realizing that this was the exact opposite of what she needed to say. "And it's so timely with the situation in South Africa right now," Marjorie said. A cold bolt of fear shot through Patricia. What was the situation in South Africa right now? After she hung up, Patricia cursed herself for being a coward and a fool, and vowed to go to the library and look up Cry the Beloved Country in the Directory of World Literature. But she had to do snacks for Corey's soccer team, and the babysitter had mono, and Carter had a sudden trip to Colombia, and she had to help him pack, and then a snake came out of the toilet in the garage room, and she had to beat it to death with a rake. And Blue drank a bottle of whiteout, and she had to take him to the doctor to see if he would die. He wouldn't. She tried to look up Alan Paton, the author, in their World Book Encyclopedia, but they were missing the P volume. She made a mental note that they needed new encyclopedias. The doorbell rang. "Mom!" Corey called from the downstairs hall. "Pizza's here!" She couldn't put it off any longer. It was time to face Marjorie. Marjorie had handouts. These are just a few articles about current events in South Africa, including the recent unpleasantness in Vanderbilt Park, she said. But I think Patricia will sum things up nicely for us in her discussion of Mr. Alan Paton's Cry the Beloved Country. Everyone turned to stare at Patricia sitting on Marjorie's enormous pink and white sofa. Not being familiar with the design of Marjorie's home, she put on a floral dress and felt like all anyone saw were her head and hands floating in midair. She wished she could pull them into her dress and just disappear completely. She felt her soul exit her body and hover up by the ceiling. "But before she begins," Marjorie said, and every head turned back her way, "let's have a moment of silence for Mr. Alan Paton. His passing earlier this year has shaken the literary world as much as it has shaken me." Patricia's brain chased itself in circles. The author was dead? Recently? She hadn't seen anything in the paper. What could she say? How had he died? Was he murdered? Torn apart by wild dogs? Heart attack? "Amen," Marjorie said. "Patricia?" Patricia's soul decided it was no fool and ascended into the afterlife, leaving her at the mercy of the women surrounding her. There was Grace Kavanaugh, who lived 2 doors down from Patricia, but whom she only met once when Grace rang her doorbell and said, "I'm sorry to bother you, but you've lived here for 6 months and I need to know, is this the way you intend for your yard to look?" Slick Paley blinked rapidly, her sharp, foxy face and tiny eyes glued to Patricia, her pen poised above her notebook. Louise Gibbs cleared her throat. Cuffy Williams blew her nose slowly into a Kleenex. Sadie Funch leaned forward, nibbling on a cheese straw, eyes boring into Patricia. The only person not looking at Patricia was Kitty Scruggs, who eyed the bottle of wine in the center of the coffee table that no one had dared open. "Well," Patricia began, "didn't we all love Cry the Beloved Country?" Sadie, Slick, and Cuffy nodded. Patricia glanced at her watch and saw that 7 seconds had passed. She could run out the clock. She let the silence linger, hoping someone would jump in and say something, but the long pause only prompted Marjorie to say, "Patricia?" "It's so sad that Alan Paton was cut down in the prime of his life before writing more novels like Cry the Beloved Country," Patricia said, feeling her way forward, word by word, guided by the nods of the other women, "because his book has so many timely and relevant things to say to us now, especially after the terrible events in Vanderbilt, South Africa." The nodding got stronger. Patricia felt her soul descending back into her body. She forged ahead. "I wanted to tell you all about Alan Paton's life," she said, "and why he wrote this book. But all those facts don't express how powerful his story is, how much it moved me, the great cry of outrage I felt when I read it. This is a book you read with your heart, not with your mind. Did anyone else feel this way?" The nods were general, all over the living room. "Exactly," Slick Paley nodded. "Yes." "I feel so strongly about South Africa," Patricia said, and then remembered that Mary Brasington's husband was in banking, and Joni Whiter's husband did something with the stock market, and they might have investments there. "But I know there are many sides to the issue, and I wonder if anyone wanted to present another point of view, in the spirit of Mr. Paton's book. This should be a conversation, not a speech." Everyone was nodding. Her soul settled back into her body. She had done it. She had survived. Marjorie cleared her throat. "Patricia," Marjorie asked, What did you think about what the book had to say about Nelson Mandela? So inspirational, Patricia said. He simply towers over everything, even though he's really just mentioned. I don't believe he is, Marjorie said, and Slick Paley stopped nodding. Where did you see him mentioned? On which page? Patricia's soul began ascending into the light again. Goodbye, it said. Goodbye, Patricia. You're on your own now. His spirit of freedom, Patricia said. It pervades every page. When this book was written, Marjorie said, Nelson Mandela was still a law student and a minor member of the ANC. I'm not sure how his spirit could be anywhere in this book, let alone pervading every page. Marjorie drilled into Patricia's face with her ice-pick eyes. Well, Patricia croaked, because she was dead now, and apparently death felt very, very dry. What he was going to do, you could feel it building in there, in his book that we read. Patricia, Marjorie said, you didn't read the book, did you? Time stopped. No one moved. Patricia wanted to lie, but a lifetime of breeding made her a lady. Some of it, Patricia said. Marjorie let out a soul-deep sigh that seemed to go on forever. Where did you stop? She asked. The first page, Patricia said, then began to babble. I'm sorry, I know I've let you down, but the babysitter had mono, and Carter's mother is staying with us, and a snake came out of the commode, and everything's just been so hard this month. I really don't know what to say except I'm so, so sorry. Black crept in around the edges of her vision. A high-pitched tone shrilled in her right ear. Well, Marjorie said, you're the one who's lost out by robbing yourself of what is probably one of the finest works of world literature. And you've robbed all of us of your unique point of view, but what's done is done. Who else would be willing to lead the discussion? Sadie Funch retracted into her Laura Ashley dress like a turtle. Nancy Fox started shaking her head before Marjorie even reached the end of her sentence, and Cuffy Williams froze like a prey animal confronted by a predator. Did anyone actually read this month's book? Marjorie asked. Silence. I cannot believe this, Marjorie said. We all agreed 11 months ago to read the great books of the Western world, and now less than 1 year later we've come to this. I am deeply disappointed in all of you. I thought we wanted to better ourselves, expose ourselves to thoughts and ideas from outside Mount Pleasant. The men all say, it's not too clever for a girl to be clever, and they laugh at us because they think we only care about our hair. The only books they give us are cookbooks because in their minds we are silly, lightweight know-nothings, and you've just proven them right. She stopped to catch her breath. Patricia noticed sweat glistening in her eyebrows. Marjorie continued, I strongly suggest y'all go home and think about whether you want to join us next month to read Jude the Obscure and... Grace Kavanaugh stood, hitching her purse over one shoulder. Grace? Marjorie asked. Are you not staying? I just remembered an appointment, Grace said. It entirely slipped my mind. Well, Marjorie said, her momentum undermined. Don't let me keep you. I wouldn't dream of it, Grace said, and with that, the tall, elegant, prematurely gray Grace floated out of the room. Robbed of its velocity, the meeting dissolved. Marjorie retreated to the kitchen, followed by a concerned Sadie Funch. A dispirited clump of women lingered around the dessert table making chit-chat. Patricia lurked in her chair until no one seemed to be watching and then darted out of the house. As she cut across Marjorie's front yard, she heard a noise that sounded like, hey. She stopped and looked at the source. Hey, Kitty Scruggs repeated. Kitty lurked behind the line of parked cars in Marjorie's driveway, a cloud of blue smoke hovering over her head, a long, thin cigarette between her fingers. Next to her stood Mary Ellen, something or other, also smoking. Kitty waved Patricia over with one hand. Patricia knew that Mary Ellen was a Yankee from Massachusetts who told everyone that she was a feminist, and Kitty was one of those big women who wore the kind of clothes people charitably refer to as fun. Baggy sweaters with multicolored handprints on them, chunky plastic jewelry. Patricia suspected that getting entangled with women like this was the first step on a slippery slope that ended with her wearing felt reindeer antlers at Christmas, or standing outside Citadel Mall asking people to sign a petition, so she approached them with caution. "I liked what you did there," Kitty said. "I should have found time to read the book," Patricia told her. "Why?" Kitty asked. "It was boring. I couldn't make it past the first chapter." "I need to write Marjorie a note," Patricia said, "to apologize." Mary Ellen squinted against the smoke and sucked on her cigarette. "Marjorie got what she deserved," she said, exhaling. "Listen." Kitty placed her body between the two of them and Marjorie's front door, just in case Marjorie was watching and could read lips. "I'm having some people read a book and come over to my house next month to talk about it. Mary Ellen will be there." "I couldn't possibly find the time to belong to 2 book clubs," Patricia said. "Trust me," Kitty said. "After today, Marjorie's book club is done." "What book are you reading?" Patricia asked, groping for reasons to say no. Kitty reached into her denim shoulder bag and pulled out the kind of cheap paperback they sold at the drugstore. "Evidence of Love, a true story of passion and death in the suburbs," she said. It took Patricia aback. This was one of those trashy true crime books. But clearly Kitty was reading it, and you couldn't call someone else's taste in books trashy, even if it was. "I'm not sure that's my kind of book," Patricia said. "These 2 women were best friends, and they chopped each other up with axes," Kitty said. "Don't pretend you don't want to know what happened." "Jude is obscure for a reason," Mary Ellen growled. "It's just the 2 of you?" Patricia asked. A voice piped up behind her. "Hey, everyone," Slick Paley said. "What are y'all talking about over here?" Chapter 2. The last bell of the day rang somewhere deep inside the bowels of Albemarle Academy, and the double doors opened and disgorged a mob of small children strapped beneath bulging, spine-bending book bags. They hobbled to the carpool area like elderly gnomes, bent double beneath 3-ring binders and social studies books. Patricia saw Corey and pecked at the horn. Corey looked up and broke into a loping run that made Patricia's heart hurt. Her daughter slid into the passenger seat, hauling her book bag into her lap. "Seat belts," Patricia said, and Corey clicked hers in. "Why are you picking me up?" Corey asked. "I thought we could stop by the Foot Locker and look at cleats," Patricia said. "Didn't you say you needed new ones?" "Then I was in the mood for TCBY." She felt her daughter begin to glow, and as they drove over the West Ashley Bridge, Corey explained to her mom about all her different kinds of cleats the other girls had and why she needed bladed cleats, and they had to be the hard ground cleats and not soft ground cleats, even though they played on grass because hard ground cleats were faster. When she stopped for breath, Patricia said, "I heard about what happened at recess." All the light went out inside Corey, and Patricia immediately regretted saying anything. But she had to say something, because isn't that what mothers did? "I don't know why Chelsea pulled your pants down in front of the class," Patricia said, "but it was an ugly, mean thing to do. As soon as we get home, I'm calling her mother." "No," Corey said. "Please, please, please, nothing happened. It wasn't a big deal. Please, Mom." Patricia's own mother had never taken her side in anything, and Patricia wanted Corey to understand that this wasn't a punishment. This was a good thing. But Corey refused to go into Foot Locker and mumbled that she didn't want any frozen yogurt. And Patricia felt like it was deeply unfair when all she tried to do was be a good mother, and somehow it made her the Wicked Witch of the West. By the time she pulled into their driveway, steering wheel clenched in a death grip, she was not in the mood to see a white Cadillac the size of a small boat blocking her drive, and Kitty Scruggs standing on her front steps. "Hello!" called Kitty in a way that immediately set Patricia's teeth on edge. "Corey, this is Mrs. Scruggs," Patricia said, smiling too hard. "Pleased to meet you," Corey mumbled. "You're Corey?" Kitty asked. "Listen, I heard what Donna Phelps's little girl did to you today at school." Corey looked at the ground, hair hanging over her face. Patricia wanted to tell Kitty she was only making it worse. "The next time Chelsea Phelps does something like that, Kitty said, barreling ahead. You tell everyone at the top of your lungs? Chelsea Phelps spent the night at Merritt Scruggs' house last month, and she wet her sleeping bag and blamed it on the dog. Patricia couldn't believe it. Parents didn't say things like that about other people's children. She turned to tell Corey not to listen, but saw her daughter staring at Kitty in awe, eyes round, mouth open. Really? Corey asked. She tooted at the table, too, Kitty said, and tried to blame it on the 4-year-old. For a long, frozen moment, Patricia didn't know what to say. And then Corey burst out into giggles. She laughed so hard she sat down on the front steps, fell over sideways, and gasped until she started to hiccup. Go inside and say hello to your grandmother, Patricia said, feeling suddenly grateful to Kitty. Aren't they such little pills at that age? Kitty said, watching Corey go. They are peculiar, Patricia said. They're pills, Kitty said. Bitter little pills who ought to be tied up in a sack and let out when they're 18. Here, I brought you this. She handed Patricia a glossy new paperback copy of Evidence of Love. I know you think it's trash, Kitty said, but it has passion, love, hate, romance, violence, excitement. It's just like Thomas Hardy, only in paperback, and with 8 pages of photos in the middle. I don't know, Patricia said. I don't have a lot of time. But Kitty was already retreating to her car. Patricia decided that this mystery should be called Patricia Campbell and the Inability to Say No. To her surprise, she tore through the book in 3 days. Patricia almost didn't make the meeting. Right before she left, Corey washed her face in lemon juice to get rid of her freckles and wound up getting it in both eyes, sending her shrieking into the hall, where she ran face first into a doorknob. Patricia flushed her eyes with water, put a bag of frozen peas on her goose egg, told Corey she'd had just as many, if not more, freckles when she was her age, and got her settled on the sofa with Miss Mary to watch The Cosby Show. She made it to the meeting 10 minutes late. Kitty lived on Sewee Farms, a 200-acre chunk of Boone Hall plantation that had been parceled off a long time ago as a wedding present to some lord proprietor or other. Through misadventure and poor decision-making, it had come to Kitty's grandmother-in-law. And when that eminent old lady had declined elegantly into her grave, she passed it on to her favorite grandson, Kitty's husband, Horse. Way out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by flooded rice fields and tangled pine forest, dotted with broken-backed outbuildings inhabited solely by snakes, it was anchored by a hideously ugly main house, painted chocolate brown and wrapped in sagging porches and rotting columns, with raccoons in the attic and possums in the walls. It was exactly the kind of grand home suspended in a state of gracious decay. Patricia thought all the best Charlestonians owned. Now she stood before the massive double doors on the sprawling front porch and pressed the bell, and nothing happened. She tried again. Patricia, Kitty called. Patricia looked up, around, and then Kitty leaned out the second-floor window. Go around to the side, Kitty hollered. We haven't been able to find the key to that door in forever. She met Kitty by the kitchen door. Come on in, Kitty said. Don't mind the cat. Patricia didn't see a cat anywhere, but she did see something that thrilled her. Kitty's kitchen was a disaster. Empty pizza boxes, school books, junk mail, and wet bathing suits crowded every flat surface. Back issues of Southern Living slid off chairs. A disassembled engine covered the kitchen table. By comparison, Patricia's house looked magazine perfect. This is what 5 kids looks like, Kitty said over her shoulder. Stay smart, Patricia. Stop it, too. The front hall looked like something out of Gone with the Wind, except its swooping staircase and oak floor were buried beneath a mudslide of violin cases, balled-up gym socks, taxidermied squirrels, glow-in-the-dark frisbees, sheaves of parking tickets, collapsible music stands, soccer balls, lacrosse sticks, an umbrella stand full of baseball bats, a dead 5-foot-tall rubber tree stuck inside a planter made of an amputated elephant's foot. Kitty picked her way through the carnage, leading Patricia to a front room where Slick Paley and Mary Ellen, whatever her name was, perched on the lip of a sofa covered with approximately 500 throw pillows. Across from them, Grace Kavanaugh sat ramrod straight on a piano bench. Patricia didn't see a piano. "All right," Kitty said, pouring wine from a jug. "Let's talk about axe murder." "Don't we need a name first?" Slick asked. "And to select books for the year?" "This isn't a book club," Grace said. "What do you mean this isn't a book club?" Mary Ellen asked. "We're just getting together to talk about a paperback book we all happen to read," Grace said. "It's not like it's a real book." "Whatever you say, Grace," Kitty said, thrusting mugs of wine into everyone's hands. 5 children live in this house, and it's 8 years before the oldest one moves out. If I don't get some adult conversation tonight, I'm going to blow my brains out." "Hear, hear," said Mary Ellen. 3 girls, 7, 5, and 4. 4 is such a lovely age, Slick cooed. "Is it?" Mary Ellen asked, eyes narrowing. "So are we a book club?" Patricia asked. She liked to know where things stood. "We're a book club. We're not a book club. Who cares?" Kitty said. "What I want to know is why Betty Gore came at her good friend Candy Montgomery with an axe and how the heck she got chopped up instead." Patricia looked around to see what the other women thought. Mary Ellen in her dry-cleaned blue jeans and her hair scrunchy and her harsh Yankee voice. Tiny Slick, looking like a particularly eager mouse with her pointy teeth and beady eyes. Kitty in her denim blouse with musical notes splayed across the front in gold sequins, slumping down a mug of wine. Hair a mess, just like a bear that had just woken up from hibernation, and finally Grace, with a ruffled bow at her throat, sitting straight, hands folded perfectly in her lap. Eyes blinking slowly from behind her large framed glasses, studying them all like an owl. These women were too different from her. Patricia didn't belong here. "I think," Grace said, as they sat up straighter, "that it shows a remarkable lack of planning on Betty's part. If you're going to murder your best friend with an axe, you should make sure you know what you're doing." That started the conversation, and without thinking, Patricia found herself joining in, and they were still talking about the book 2 hours later when they walked to their cars. The following month they read The Michigan Murders, the true story of the Ypsilanti Ripper's reign of terror, and then A Death in the Canaan, a classic case of good and evil in a small New England town, followed by Bitter Blood, a true story of Southern family pride, madness, and multiple murder. All of them Kitty's recommendations. They selected next year's books together, and when all the blurry black and white photos of crime scenes and minute-by-minute timelines of the night when it all happened began to blur, Grace came up with the idea of alternating each true crime book with a novel so they could read The Silence of the Lambs once a month and bury dreams inside the mind of John Wayne Gacy the next. They read The Hillside Stranglers by Darcy O'Brien, followed by Shakespeare's Titus Andronicus, with its children baked into a pie and fed to their mother. "The problem with that," Grace pointed out, "is you would need extremely large pies to fit 2 children, even minced." Patricia loved it. She asked Carter if he wanted to read along with her, but he told her he dealt with crazy patients all day, so the last thing he wanted to do was come home and read about crazy people. Patricia didn't mind. The not quite a book club, with all its slow poisoners and murders for hire and angels of death, gave her a new outlook on life. She and Carter had moved to the old village last year because they wanted to live somewhere with plenty of space, somewhere quiet, and somewhere, most importantly, safe. They wanted more than just a neighborhood. They wanted a community, where your home said you espoused a certain set of values, somewhere protected from the chaos and the ceaseless change of the outside world. Somewhere the kids could play outside all day, unsupervised, until you called them in for supper. The old village lay just across the Cooper River from downtown Charleston in the suburb of Mount Pleasant. But while Charleston was formal and sophisticated, and Mount Pleasant was its country cousin, the old village was a way of life. Or at least, that was what the people who lived there believed. And Carter had worked long and hard so that they could finally afford not just a house, but a way of life. This way of life was a slice of live oaks and gracious homes lying between Coleman Boulevard and Charleston Harbor, where everyone still waved at cars when they went by and no one drove over 25 miles an hour. It was where Carter taught Corey and Blue to crab off the dock, lowering raw chicken necks tied to long strings into the murky harbor water, and pulling up mean-eyed crabs they scooped up in nets. He took them shrimping at night, lit by the hissing white glare of their Coleman lantern. They went to oyster roasts and Sunday school, wedding receptions at Alhambra Hall, and funerals at Stores. They went to the Pirates Cruise block party every Christmas and danced the shag at Wild Dunes on New Year's Eve. Corey and Blue went to Albemarle Academy on the other side of the harbor for school and made friends and had sleepovers, and Patricia drove carpool, and no one locked their doors, and everyone knew where you left your spare key when you went out of town, and you could go out all day and leave your windows open, and the worst thing that might happen is you'd come home and find someone else's cat sleeping on your kitchen counter. It was a good place to raise children. It was a wonderful place to be a family. It was quiet and soft and peaceful and safe. But sometimes Patricia wanted to be challenged. Sometimes she yearned to see what she was made of. Sometimes she remembered being a nurse before she married Carter and wondered if she could still reach into a wound and hold an artery closed with her fingers, or if she still had the courage to pull a fishhook out of a child's eyelid. Sometimes she craved a little danger, and that was why she had book club. In the fall of '91, Kitty's beloved Minnesota Twins made it to the World Series, and she got Horse to chainsaw the 2 pine trees in their front yard and lay out a scaled-down baseball diamond in white lime. She invited all the members of their not-quite-a-book club over to play a game with their husbands. "Y'all," Slick said at their last meeting before the game, "I need to unburden my conscience." "Jesus Christ," Mary Ellen said, rolling her eyes. "Here it comes." "Don't talk about who you don't know," Slick shot back. "Now, y'all, I don't like asking people to sin." "If baseball's a sin, I'm going to hell," Kitty said. "My husband, well," Slick said, ignoring Kitty, "Leland wouldn't understand why we read such morbid books in our book club." "It's not a book club," Grace said. "And I didn't want to worry him," Slick forged on, "so I told him we were a Bible study group." No one said anything for a full 15 seconds. Finally, Mary Ellen spoke. "You told your husband we've been reading the Bible?" It rewards a lifetime of study," Slick said. The silence stretched on as they looked at each other, incredulous, and then they all burst out laughing. "I'm serious, y'all," Slick said. "He won't let me come anymore if he knows." They realized she was serious. "Slick," Kitty said solemnly, "I promise on Saturday all of us will profess a sincere and deep enthusiasm for the Word of God." And on Saturday, they all did. The husbands bumbled together in Kitty's front yard, shaking hands and making jokes, with their weekend stubble and their Clemson logos and their polo shirts tucked into their stonewashed jean shorts. Kitty divided them into teams, splitting up the couples, but Patricia insisted Corey be allowed to play. "All the other children are swimming off the dock," Kitty said. "She'd rather play baseball," Patricia said. "I'm not going to pitch underhanded just because she's a child," Kitty told her. "She'll be fine," Patricia said. Kitty had a strong swing and on the pitcher's mound. She threw lethal fastballs. Corey watched her strike out Slick and Ed. Then she was up at bat. "Mom?" she asked. "What if I miss?" "Then you tried your best," Patricia told her. "What if I break one of her windows?" Corey asked. "Then I'll buy you frozen yogurt on the way home," Patricia said. But as Corey walked to home plate, a bolt of worry shot through Patricia. Corey held the bat uncomfortably, and its tip wobbled in the air. Her legs looked too thin. Her arms looked too weak. She was just a baby. Patricia got ready to comfort her and tell her she tried her best. Kitty gave Patricia an apologetic shrug, then drew her right arm back and sent a fastball screaming at Corey in a straight line. There was a crack, and the ball suddenly reversed direction, sailing in a high arc towards Kitty's house. And then at the last moment, it lifted, soaring over the roof, over the house, coming down somewhere deep in the woods. Everyone, even Corey, watched, frozen. "Go, Corey!" Patricia screamed, breaking the silence. "Run!" Corey circled the bases, and her team took the game 6-4. Corey was at bat for every single one of those points. 6 months later, it became clear Miss Mary could no longer live on her own. Carter and his 2 older brothers agreed to take turns having their mother stay with them 4 months at a time, and Carter, being the youngest, took her first. Then Sandy called the day before he was supposed to drive down and pick her up, saying, "My kid's too young to be around Mama when she's confused like this. We want them to remember her the way she used to be." Carter called his oldest brother, but Bobby said, "Mom wouldn't be comfortable in Virginia. It's too cold up here." Harsh words were exchanged, and then Carter, sitting on the end of their bed, jammed his thumb down hard on the portable phone's hang-up button and held it there for a very long time before saying, "Mom's staying." "For how long?" asked Patricia. "Forever," he said. "But Carter," she began. "What do you want me to do, Patty?" he asked. "Throw her out on the street? I can't put her in a home?" Patricia immediately softened. Carter's father had died when he was young, and his mother raised him alone. His next oldest brother was 8 years his senior, so it had been Carter and his mother on their own. Miss Mary's sacrifices for Carter were family legend. "You're right," she said. "We have the garage room. We'll make it work." "Thank you," he said after a long pause, and he sounded so genuinely grateful. Patricia knew they'd made the right decision. But Corey was starting middle school, and Blue couldn't focus on his math, and he needed a tutor, and he was only in 4th grade, and Carter's mother couldn't always say what she was thinking, and she was getting worse every day. Frustration poisoned Miss Mary's personality. Once she had doted on her grandchildren. Now, when Blue accidentally knocked over her buttermilk, she pinched his arm so hard it left a black and blue mark. She kicked Patricia in the shin after finding out there was no liver for her supper. She demanded to be taken to the bus station constantly. After a series of incidents, Patricia learned she couldn't be left home alone. Grace stopped by early one afternoon on a day when Miss Mary had already thrown her bowl of cereal on the floor, then clogged her toilet in the garage room with an entire roll of toilet paper. "I wanted to invite you to be my guest for the closing night of Spoleto," Grace told Patricia. "I have tickets for you, Kitty, Mary Ellen, and Slick. I thought it would be nice if we did something cultural." Patricia ached to go. Closing night of Spoleto took place outdoors at Middleton Place. You had a picnic on a blanket on the hill facing the lake where the Charleston Symphony Orchestra played classical music, and it ended with fireworks. Then she heard Ragtag yelp from the den, and Miss Mary say something ugly. "I'm sorry, but I can't," Patricia said. "Can I help?" said Grace. And it all came out. How scared Patricia felt about Miss Mary living with them, how hard it was for her to sit at the table for dinner with the children, how much of a strain it was on her and Carter. "But I don't want to complain," Patricia said. "She did so much for Carter." Grace said she was sorry Patricia couldn't make it, then left, and Patricia cursed herself for talking too much. The next day, a pickup truck pulled into Patricia's driveway with Kitty's boys in the back, along with a portable toilet, a walker, bedpans, washing basins, large-handled plastic cutlery, and boxes of unbreakable plates. Kitty heaved herself out of the driver's seat. "When Horse's mother lived with us, we wound up with all this junk," she said. "We'll bring the hospital bed over tomorrow. I just need to round up some more fellows to lift it." Patricia realized that Grace must have called Kitty and told her the situation. Before she could call Grace to say thank you, her doorbell rang again. A short black woman, plump but sharp-eyed, her hair set in a stiff, old-fashioned helmet, wearing white slacks and a white nurse's tunic under a purple cardigan, stood on her front porch. "Mrs. Kavanaugh said you might be able to use my help," the woman said. "My name is Ursula Green. I take care of old folks." "It's very nice of you," Patricia began, "but I'll look after the children occasionally at no extra charge." Mrs. Green said, "I'm not a babysitter, but Mrs. Kavanaugh said you might step out from time to time. I charge $11 an hour and $13 an hour at night. I don't mind cooking for the little ones, but I don't want it to become a habit." It was cheaper than Patricia thought. but she still couldn't imagine anyone being willing to deal with Miss Mary. "Before you make a decision," she said, "let me introduce you to my mother-in-law." They walked onto the sun porch where Miss Mary sat watching television. Miss Mary scowled at the interruption. "Who's this?" she snipped. "This is Mrs. Green," Patricia said. "Mrs. Green, I'd like you to meet—" "What's she doing here?" Miss Mary said. "I've come to brush your hair and do your nails," Mrs. Green said, "and make you something to eat later." Why can't that one do it?" Miss Mary asked, jabbing a gnarled finger at Patricia. "Because you're working that last one's nerve," Mrs. Green said, "and if that one doesn't get a break, she's liable to throw you off the roof." Miss Mary thought about it for a minute, then said, "No one's pushing me off any roof." "Keep acting like that, and I might help her," Mrs. Green said. 3 weeks later, Patricia sat on a green plaid blanket at Middleton Place, listening to the Charleston Symphony Orchestra play Handel's Music for the Royal Fireworks. Overhead, the first fireworks unfolded until it filled the sky like a burning green dandelion. Fireworks always moved Patricia. It took so much time and effort to get them right, and they were over so quickly and could only be enjoyed by a much smaller number of people. By the light of the fireworks, she looked at the women sitting around her. Grace in a lawn chair, eyes closed, listening to the music. Kitty, asleep on her back, plastic wine glass tipping dangerously in one hand. Mary Ellen in her overalls, legs stretched out in front of her, taking in Charleston's finest, and Slick, legs tucked beneath her, head cocked, listening to the music like it was homework. Patricia realized that for 4 years, these were the women she'd seen every month. She talked to them about her marriage and her children and gotten frustrated with them and argued with them and seen all of them cry at some point. And somewhere along the line, among all the slaughtered co-eds and shocking small-town secrets and missing children and true accounts of the cases that changed America forever, she learned 2 things. They were all in this together, and if their husbands ever took out a life insurance policy on them, they were in trouble. And I think that will be it for this evening. Thank you all so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any feedback, I will happily take it, as I am still very new to this. And this is a novel. It is quite long. We got through the first, the prologue and the first 2 chapters today, so I think 2 chapters a week. We'll be at this for a minute.